permit me to use this opportunity to address a critical issue. You know, that is an issue that affects, you know, when Port Harcourt is the capital of Rivers State, and Rivers State is the epicenter. Rivers State has become the epicenter of godfatherism in Nigeria. Rivers State is undermining democracy in Nigeria. It has been a trend beginning from 1999 that every governor of Rivers State will become the founder of the ruling party. Everyone that is a governor of Rivers State will not decide that the resources of Rivers State will be used to fund any ruling party at that time. Whether it is the PDP or the APC, the Rivers State government resources have been used to fund the rigging of elections across Nigeria. More than any other state, you see. You know, so we have to show that this has now matured. This situation, this impunity has now matured. That so much that even ex-governors of Rivers State now want to continue to control the resources of the state as if these resources are their private ATM. To continue to direct the affairs of the state from Abuja or elsewhere. This is the impunity that should not endure. You know, I participated in the pro-democracy struggle. I was imprisoned in the struggle for to bring about democracy in this country. And I know there are comrades who are here that participated in that struggle. These dictators that we have, you know, so-called party leaders, so-called owners of political structures in Nigeria, in Rivers State, and in all over the country, are worse than the military dictators that we chased out. One of the things that we must point out, you know, that they don't learn from history. They don't learn from history. If they learn from history, they will remember that even the military dictators were chased out by the people of Nigeria. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If they learn from history, they will realize that once upon a time, there was a dictator, the one they called Maradona, the Ibrahim Babangida, who ran away from a government house because it was impossible for him to rule. Because of the mobilization of the Nigerian people against dictatorship. That is the reality. That is part of the story of Nigeria. The story of Nigeria, the story of this democracy that we have is not just about these politicians and those that run around them. That story also includes, you know, the NSAS struggle. That story also includes, you know, the occupied Nigeria. You know, they should understand that that's been in the past, that the Nigerian people have the capacity to revolt because this system, if it endures, it cannot stand. Any democratic system or any system by whatever name called, if it does not satisfy the basic needs of the people, ultimately the people will rise. And that time, that day will come. We have a situation where there is a gang that has taken over the affairs of Nigeria. And that gang, that cabal of godfathers, they cook their strategies beginning from Rivers State. You know, everybody knows, if not in Nigeria, in Rivers State, that the presidential election result that was announced for Rivers State is far, far from the reality. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. And we cannot sit down in conferences of this nature and talk about institutional reform and capacity building and all of those NGO jargons without facing the reality that the people know the truth. Yes. And we cannot continue with this lie. We cannot continue with this lie. We cannot continue with this lie. Every system must be judged The relevance, the efficacy of any system must be judged by how that system responds to the most vulnerable, to those who are poorest. If you want to judge the so-called dividends of democracy, you have to go to the so-called water sides or the waterfronts to see where our people live. You have to go to our villages, to our towns, to see the situation with our hospitals. In this state, as in the Niger Delta, as in other parts of Nigeria, when you hear ambulance, you think of funeral. When you hear ambulance, it's to carry dead body. How many government public hospitals in this state have ambulance, real ambulance, that can respond to the needs of the people? When we are growing up in the city of Port Harcourt, every street had pipe-borne water. Today in the River State, there is no pipe-borne water. Everybody has become a water corporation, building boreholes everywhere. For those that can afford it. For the vast majority of people, they are still drinking chromium and drinking benzene and drinking hydrocarbons every day. And when we discuss, when all the things that we talk about, we must realize that ultimately, it is about these people, it is about our people, it's about Nigeria that we're talking about. It's about Nigeria that we're talking about. And history cannot be static. History cannot be static. To imagine for anyone in power today, to imagine that because they have rigged themselves to power, to boast to our people, that is the way it will be, then they know nothing. Because the Nigerian people will continue to make their history. And that history will be a history of freedom. It will be a history of liberation. It will be a freedom history of liberty. And we all have to take a stand. River State should take a stand. The Niger Delta must take a stand against impunity, against dictatorship, by whatever coloration. Fellow patriots, Nigeria returned to democratic rule in 1999 with high hopes that the elected governments will usher in an era of transparency, accountability, and people-centered development. We believe that having the vote will empower citizens to demand good governance. We have had changes of ruling parties at the federal level and in some states, during numerous elections at all levels. But what we find, that rather than promoting accountability over the period, that very often the institutions have become weakened. We have situations where government bodies, agencies that have been established by law, empowered in different ways, are being consciously undermined by those that are in the executive arms of government, the president and the governors. I will give you an example. The president of Nigeria just approved a scam against Nigeria. A scam against Nigeria. Shell, after decades of devastating the Niger Delta and siphoning off billions of dollars in profits, polluting the land, and consciously and deliberately allowing the pipelines to be compromised because it suits their thieving motive. If there is some tout who is having access to a pipeline, they use that one to mask the billions of dollars that they loot through the export terminals. And after all of these crimes, when first UNEP reports on Ogoniland, the Bayelsa reports begin to show the evidence of their misdeeds. And then they realize that there are potentials, penalties, liabilities that will run into billions of dollars. They organized a scam. They called their guys together and said, okay, you have created a company called Renaissance. They gave Renaissance money, these people money, their own staff, their own employees and their own agents. Gave them money to come and buy over the onshore assets of SPDC in the name of divestment or by whatever they've called. The people of the Niger Delta protested because this shape shell has not compensated Umuechem for the massacre of 1990. This same shell has not compensated the people of Rumwekbe for the massacre of that community. We are not even talking about the communities where they have despoiled the land. Liabilities running to billions of dollars, many, many billions of dollars. And when an agency of government, the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, doing their work, their statutory duty to check the qualification of the buyer, Nubric rejected Shell's request to sell off shares because Nubric identified, they did their due diligence, they had consultants that checked everything and realized, and even considering the clamor of the Nigerian people, the House of Representatives passed a resolution calling for a halt to the so-called divestment. There were protests in Port Harcourt. Chiefs and elders of the Niger Delta appealed to the authorities to not allow Shell to go without addressing their historical liabilities. But despite an agency of government saying no, President TINUBU personally ordered Nubric to change their memo. By so doing, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria undermined the economic interests of Nigeria. Because you are allowing an European company to walk away from their liabilities. And the Nigerian state will not be responsible. The Nigerian people will not be responsible for the cost of years, decades of violence against the people. Against regulatory authority. So we see there's a pattern that is here. You know, we can give examples concerning Nostra as well. And so to conclude, therefore, I will say that in our discussions, you know, talking about resilience, talking about the need to strengthen institutions that are relevant to the anti-corruption crusade in Nigeria, that let us not forget that ultimately this struggle is political, that ultimately, you know, that we cannot achieve the change that we want if we do not achieve electoral justice. Because we have to ensure that the kind of carnage, the kind of criminality that was on display openly in Rivers State during the last elections does not continue. Because except we do that, all our discussions will just be wasted. Thank you.